Hey there, good morning. So I want to share my thoughts about this hurricane, Hurricane Florence, who is barreling towards South Carolina and North Carolina. I have a long history with hurricanes. I just recently had a conversation with my colleagues. I'm a producer and I'm working on a TV show, and we are slated to go to Florida for exactly when the hurricane is now hitting. And when we were first thinking about, when in timing we were going to go for this to film this episode, everybody was like, "Oh, let's do it like first couple of weeks in September." We were in a room full of about 15 people, and everybody's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, okay." And my heart dropped, and I was the only person who was like, "Hey, is anybody else worried that that's right in the heart of hurricane season?" Everybody looked at me like blankly. And not to disparage my colleagues, but this is what normally happens. People look at you blankly. And one person said, "Oh, I thought that was more the summertime." And I was like, "No." And then another person was like, "Oh, well, chances are it won't be that bad." And it's had me thinking a lot because meanwhile, in my internal monologue was the opposite. My internal monologue was, no, it actually is always bad now. It is the new normal. And people don't understand that. The reason that I understand that is my family has a long history with Miami. I went to high school in Miami. I lived in Miami. My parents lived in Miami for years. Much of my family still lives in Miami. And I watched as my elderly parents would have, no food, no electricity, no water, all the supplies gone from the shelves. And they would have to survive in those conditions for a month, 2 months, sometimes 3 months. Hurricane Katrina rolled right over them on the way to New Orleans and the Gulf. And I finally convinced my parents to move out of Miami. And, everybody thought I was crazy. Like, Miami's a freaking amazing city. Why would they move out of Miami? I was like, this is not the place that I want you to weather your older years, your prime years of your life. It's not sustainable because it's the new normal. And people still think I'm crazy when I tell them that story. And so in this hurricane conversation with Hurricane Florence, I just want to remind people that the previous conversation was that hurricanes are getting, it's not that we're getting more of them, it's that they're getting more intense and bigger. Now, there's new data from the NOAA just released on Washington Post 2 days ago that it's not just that they're getting bigger and more intense, it's that they're ramping up from a category 1 to a category 4 fast. And that's what just happened with Florence. Thank goodness she's downgraded to a 3 now, but she could easily jump. And that's the newest thing that we're seeing with climate change and with the warming of the waters, is that these hurricanes are able to make that leap really fast. So I'm going to post the link to this Washington Post article after I'm done with this live stream so that you can all see it. But in this article, I'm looking at the quote right now. She's saying the reason there are going to be more major hurricanes is not necessarily that there are going to be many more storms. It's the fact that these storms are going to get there faster. So, we have Hurricane Florence barreling, and then there are 2 others right behind. So when I started Gungho Eco, I was like, I want to have conversation about this that also looks at the positive. And the positive thing about this is that we have free will. We have free will as people to protect ourselves and to be prepared for emergencies. I think it's one of the most empowered things that we can do is to protect our own survival. So I think the number one rule when you're faced with a major disaster like this is be flexible to move. Be flexible to move. I mean, it's like what we saw with Hurricane Katrina was people camped out, didn't leave, often didn't have the resources to leave, not their fault, didn't have a car. A lot of people did have a car, didn't leave, wanted to hunker down, put boards up on the windows, and then literally had to be rescued and lost everything. There, people were writing on the roofs, please help me, send rescue. This is the new normal. We can't wait for others to rescue us. We need to rescue ourselves. And so the number one thing is you have to be flexible and you have to get out. You have to get out. I'm so tired of seeing on the news all these people hunker down and being like, I'm just going to weather the storm with my house and my belongings. I'm like, take the cat, take your parrot or your dog, take your kids, get out. Like, we as humans, there is a huge argument that we were meant to be nomadic, that we were meant to move around, and we're very stationary right now. We like to buy houses. We like to stay in these static places. And a lot of us don't have the luxury or the privilege to be able to move. And so the second thing is be flexible, get out. If you can't, or I mean, if someone around you can't, we need to help them do that as well. We need to help the people who don't have the privilege to leave and be flexible and not sit in a storm. Just for reference, I mean, Hurricane Andrew took the roof off of my cousin's house, and he was huddled in a bathroom with his two kids weeping. I mean, this is serious. 160, 190 mile per hour winds, shards of buildings flying at you. Like, every time I think about a hurricane, I get teary eyed. Like, it's terrifying. Same thing with typhoons over in the Pacific. Same thing with earthquakes. Get out. Like, earthquakes, you don't have preparation, but a hurricane, it's coming. Get out. And then second thing is push for climate adaptation plans for your city, your town, your state. North Carolina is getting a lot of criticism right now because they basically blocked climate science to talk about rising waters just before this happened. And now everybody in the climate community is like, well, you reap what you sow. If hurricanes were targeted, then it looked like they'd be coming right for you because you were blocking climate science. And we liberals are not trying to turn society communist. We're not trying to we're not trying to do the things that a lot of conservatives say that are climate deniers. All of the scientists that are not in the pay of big oil are confirmed. We are heating up the planet. And it is causing things like these hurricanes that can jump from a category 1 to a category 4. So what we need adaptation plans in our towns, in our cities, in our states about how to adapt to climate change so that people aren't building on coasts that will be going underwater. This is super important. And it's empowering because it's taking our free will and responsibility into our hands, not waiting for anyone to save us, not waiting for FEMA, not waiting for President 45, us. I hope this is impactful to you. Please share and stay dry.